Hi, class. Welcome to week 6, and I cannot believe how quickly we are approaching to the mid portion of this summer course. And welcome to my digital office. And in the last weeks, we have been talking about collecting data. We have been talking about observations, field notes, and interviews. And if you have just submitted your data collection assignment, you now know what it feels like to come back from the field with a pile of notes and wonder, now what? So this week we start answering that question, but the answer is not to transcribe everything or bring everything. In fact, the most important thing you can do with your recorded data is what you do before you transcribe it. And these week readings are inviting us to think about that. So Heath and Street, for example, describe a practice called logging. And it happens before you transcribe anything. And what it means is that you listen to your recordings and you make notes. So this is not a transcript and is a log. So what you see here on page 87 is an example of how a digital audio log looks like and the details that you put there for your own analysis or pre-analysis. And you note the time, the place, who is speaking, what is the primary activity, or what the primary activity seems to be. And then you do something that sounds simple, but it's actually hard. You know what seems ordinary and what seems non-ordinary. And why is that hard? Because after weeks in a field site, you start to feel like you know what is normal. And that is exactly when you are most at risk of missing something. So normal is not the same as unimportant. Some of the most analytically significant moments in my dissertation data look completely ordinary on the first encounter. For example, a teacher using or deploying their multilingualism on the hallway, a joke during a PD meeting that everyone laughed and moved on from. And those moments did not announce themselves. They became important because I went back to my logs and noticed patterns that I had missed in real time. So logging is not just a practical step, it's your first analytical move. And on these sides, you're going to see the beginning of the logging from the recording that you are going to listen during this modules week. So you're going to see the initial details and you need to continue that for this week's discussion. Okay? So some of you will remember that in Module 4, I show you my field notes from a NES meeting and pointed out something uncomfortable. I have a smooth all teachers' speech into a standard written English. And every teacher sounded the same on my page, regardless of their linguistic background. And we compare that with he and how she represents differently that in ways with words. So this week, Copeland and Chris push that insight further. They show us two transcriptions on the same conversation between a trainer and a trainee. And the first one is rough. It captures, sorry, my apologies for that. My apologies. So what it captures the words, the exchange looks like a normal professional conversation, but the second adds pauses, interruptions, prosodic detail, stage directions. And suddenly you can see something that the rough version hid. The trainer interrupts, apologizes quickly in a way that dismisses the apology, slows down on certain words to mark her authority, and the trainee passes for a long time before answering no in a way that makes you question whether she means it. And these two things are the same words, but the detailed transcription reveals a power dynamic that this side of the transcription may invisible. And that is not a technical difference. It is an analytical one. So the level of detail you choose determines what your data can show you. And since you cannot transcribe everything at that level of detail, you have to choose. So what you choose to look at closely and what you leave at the surface level depends on your research questions, your theoretical commitments, and honestly, on what your own communication background trains you to notice or what your discipline has trained you to notice. Now, in Ways with Words, we are going to cover the last point of this week's readings. And I know that those are very long chapters, but we are very close to finish them. And I think that this is a beautiful example of how a ethnographic study looks like by the end. Not all ethnographic studies end with this type of product. Mine didn't and won't end in a book like this. But I just wanted to show you the commitment that you need to do personally and professionally when you want to use or employ this method for your research questions. So in those chapters, he shows that communities have fundamentally different relationships to narrative. In Rowville, a story must be factual and carry a moral. In Tracton, a story is a performance, and exaggeration is the craft. If you enter one of those communities carrying the other community norms, you will filter out the data that does not match your expectations. You might hear a Tracton performance and dismiss it as showing off. And you might hear a Rockville account and think nothing is happening here. So the same thing will happen when you listen to the recording I have posted for this module. Some moments will jump out as at you and others will slide past. Part of this week's work is noticing which moments catch your attention and asking yourself, is that because the moment is analytically significant or because my background trains me to hear it in that way? Learning to hold both possibilities is one of the core skills of ethnographic analysis. So here is what is ahead of us for this week. This week, you will listen a short recording from an SEI meeting, and in the discussion, you will write a brief log entry about what you noticed. Remember, you have the first part in the second slide. Next week, Module 7, you will transcribe a portion of that recording using conventions and then reflect on what your choices reveal. By the end of the sequence, you will have lived the full arc from logging, transcribing, and analyzing it or doing the analysis. So when you listen this week, resist the urge to transcribe in your head. Just listen. Notice who speaks, who does not, is giving their ideas, and notice what catches your ear and what you tune out. That is where the analysis begins, and that's what I want to hear from you. So, my friends, I hope that you have an amazing week. And if you have any questions, let me know. See you on the discussion board. Bye, class.